Good morning. So this video is not going to be specifically about accents. We've done lots of videos so far about how you can speak in a Posh accent. This one is going to be a bit more general about how to be and appear to be posh. My assumption is that if you are trying to cultivate a Porsche accent, you're probably wanting to develop a kind of brand, a personal brand that presents yourself as being cultured or elegant or classy or sophisticated or intellectual. So you'll be wanting to think about other things as well as how you sound, what your accent comes out as, but also how you appear, how you behave. So we're going to look at that in this video, and I think probably in the future we shall do other videos that look at things other than just accents. In a previous video we talked about how you don't necessarily have to have lots of money to be posh, you don't have to be rich. What you need is to speak well, preferably to use a very posh accent, to have impeccable manners, and to carry yourself with dignity. Okay, I have come across the idea from some people that you can't become posh. It's not, being posh isn't something that you can choose to be, it's how you're born. I think that's a mistaken notion, because I think that's confusing being upper class, being part of the aristocracy or the landed gentry, having old money, and confusing that with being posh generally. Obviously there's a relationship between being posh and upper class culture, so a lot of the things that are associated with being posh have their roots in the upper class. For instance, the heightened received pronunciation accent. However, I think when people talk about somebody who's posh, they're generally not talking about somebody who's necessarily upper class. They may well be talking about a music teacher or the lady who arranges the flowers in their church, or they might be talking about some eccentric lady who they see walking her poodle every day. It is quite difficult to define poshness because it is a colloquialism, it's an informal term, and it can mean so many different things. And so there may be different ways of being posh, but basically it's a set of qualities that we associate with status in society. Okay? I'm not sure I embody those qualities terribly well, being somebody who likes metal. I mean, metal's the most unposh thing you could like. And I have very plebeian tastes. I dress like a slob, and I like to eat hamburgers and bacon sandwiches and drink lots of beer. So I'm not, although I might speak posh, I don't think I'm a terribly posh person, but I know a little bit about some of the things that are necessary to appear posh, so I bring that knowledge to you in this video. And sometimes poshness is applied not just to people, but also to things. So sometimes people talk about posh restaurants, or they might even describe some garden furniture as being posh. So because as I say, I'm not the most posh person you could meet, I'm going to be a bit lazy in this video, and I'm going to look at a website to get a bit of help, to provide a bit of a template for discussing qualities associated with being posh. And you can find this particular webpage on the website WikiHow. WikiHow has all sorts of useful articles, and this particular one is called How to Be Posh, and it's co-authored by somebody called Jordan Stoik. Jordan Stoik is an image consultant and style advisor, so this lady must know quite a bit about branding and image, so I think it's quite useful to look at this particular webpage and what she says about the topic. So Jordan Stoik says, to be posh, you just need to invent your own definition of elegant style and sociability, and I like that because there are different ways to be posh. There are different aspects of it. So when you try to develop your own personal brand of poshness, you're going to be tailoring it to your own sort of ideas and notions, and it will be very unique to you how you try to appear posh. Okay. So, in terms of acting posh, she says it's very important to have good manners, and that's absolutely right. You need to remember your pleases and thank yous, to greet people, and to have good table manners. We unfortunately live in a society where some of those things are very much in decline, and some, particularly table manners, some people really leave a lot to be desired. You need to chew your mouth closed. That's very important. Not use your mobile phone at the table. I'm afraid I sometimes do that when I'm with my family, but my parents, they like their mobile phones an awful lot, so they don't seem to be too bothered about occasionally looking at their phones at the meal table. But in general, in polite society, you kind of want to put your phone away and actually talk to people. Have you watched some of William Hanson's videos about etiquette? Perhaps you might find him a little bit insufferable, and sometimes his rules of etiquette can be a bit overly strict, but it can be quite informative to watch some of the things that he says about behaving properly. So you might want to watch William Hanson's videos on YouTube. Hmm. Avoid an arrogant attitude. Yes, now that's really important. Being humble, not bragging, not being boastful. If you're posh, you're confident in your own status within society, and so you don't need to be arrogant and show off and have something to prove to others. Okay? Of course, here, this is where poshness overlaps a bit with Englishness. So in some cultures, people from an aristocratic or an upper class place in society might well be expected to be arrogant and to show off and show extravagance. Um, Nevertheless, our notions of what it means to be posh have very much been defined by the idea of an English gentleman or an English lady. So because in English culture we value modesty, that's become quite important in terms of defining our ideas of what it means to be posh. So uh, it's quite interesting that. Okay. So she says you need to take responsibility for your actions and obligations. So you behave with integrity. You keep your promises. You keep your word. So if you're posh, you have a standing in society. You take care over what people think about you. Perhaps to some extent, being posh is about avoiding being a cad. So a cad is like a failed posh person. So your cad basically appears like a gentleman, and he appears very posh and appears very smooth. Nevertheless, he's a bad man. He's got no integrity. He's a bit of a scoundrel. He's completely untrustworthy, and that's sort of what you definitely want to avoid being if you're trying to be posh, not being that cad. Be articulate. Okay, and this is really important. So in our society, sadly, vocabulary is really going downhill. So many wonderful English words are being abandoned, and people use so much colloquialism and slang to communicate. So if you want to be posh, you need to expand your vocabulary. You need to find different ways of saying things. Uh, so an example of that would be very. We don't want to always use the word very. We want to find alternatives to that. So we say rather. I thought that was rather impressive. Or you might say awfully or delightfully. So you might say the food in that restaurant was delightfully tasty. Uh, that chap's got an awfully big nose. The alternatives to saying very, and maybe find alternatives to saying nice. So sometimes you might say that something's delightful or that it's lovely, rather than always saying that it's nice. You might have had that lesson when you were learning English at school, perhaps. Okay. One colloquialism I really detest is badass. This word badass. Maybe I might make an entire video about how much I hate that word. You see it, you hear it a lot on YouTube when people are reacting to television programs or movies on YouTube. They say that if a character appears particularly courageous, they say, "Oh, she's badass." Or if she's very clever and very resourceful, they say, "Oh, she's badass." And if she's very strong and able to defeat people in combat, they say, "Oh, she's badass." It's terrible just using this one vulgar colloquialism to mean so many different things when there's so many lovely English words that you could use instead. So you do need to watch the colloquialisms and the slang that you use. I'm not saying you can't ever use any colloquialisms or slang, but you want to really keep them to a minimum and develop a better vocabulary, okay? Swearing, likewise. Yes, it's true that sometimes people who are posh do swear. I have been known to occasionally use the odd unpleasant word myself. Yes, posh people sometimes swear, but they're not perfect. In general, posh people keep words like that to a minimum. They speak articulately. And if you're using vulgar words, then you're not really speaking articulately. So think about that a bit. Look for posh people you admire. This is her advice. So, she cites a number of examples of people who you might want to copy it to develop your brand of poshness. So she suggests Emma Watson, Kate Middleton, Benedict Cumberbatch, and Eddie Redmayne. Okay, yes, those are good examples of people who are generally considered to be posh. Coming back to the accent side of it, you need to bear in mind that some of those people don't necessarily speak consistently with traditional received pronunciation. So if you're looking for people to develop your accent, those aren't necessarily the best examples to listen to. So Emma Watson, for instance, speaks in very contemporary modern English. She might, in some ways she sounds posh, but she uses a lot of very contemporary ways of speaking. Likewise, Benedict Cumberbatch, in some of his television and film roles, he does sound very posh and uses traditional received pronunciation, depending on the character he's playing. But when he's speaking informally, there's a lot of contemporary modes of speech in what he says. So if you want examples to develop your accent, you need to be listening to people like Joanna Lumley, the late Christopher Lee, David Attenborough, or members of the royal family. They're the best people to listen to. Kate Middleton, I've observed before that her accent has got a lot posher. She does use some proper received pronunciation. I'm not sure if she's always consistent with it, but she does use a lot of traditional received pronunciation in her speech. Practice a posh accent, and that's what this YouTube channel is all about. So we've made lots of videos about that, and we're going to make a lot more. The author calls this upper received pronunciation, upper RP. We also call it heightened RP, conservative RP, traditional RP, whatever your preferred way of calling it. So she cites the example there, pronounce your consonants more fully. So as in the last video I talked about pronouncing your T's, you need to do that. She also mentions the trap vowel, so you don't do the ah sound, you make an eh sound instead. So the example she gives, when you say man, you make it sound like man, man. We don't say animal, we say animal. Okay. Of course, as I mentioned, some of the examples she gives about posh people don't necessarily speak strictly with upper received pronunciation or traditional received pronunciation. So Emma Watson, as I mentioned, and Benedict Cumberbatch, and those people are still considered to be quite posh. So I think it's very important to get your accent in RP, but that's just my opinion that is an important part of being posh. And that's, as I say, the focus of this particular YouTube channel. So a lot of people who are considered to be posh is basically speaking correct, standard Southern English. it is possible to be posh and speak in provincial English accents. So you might get people who've got a Yorkshire accent or a West Country accent who are posh, maybe not in the way they speak, but in being very refined, being very cultured, being very sophisticated. I don't know if you've ever been to the town Harrogate in Yorkshire. So in Harrogate, I expect most people probably speak in a Yorkshire accent, yet it's considered to be quite a posh town, maybe a little bit snooty. Apologies to anybody who comes from Harrogate. But yes, it is possible to be posh without having an RP accent, but I do think it helps. Take part in posh activities. So she suggests talking to people, and that's really important. Being friendly to other people, so you should talk to the person who cleans your office, you should talk to the person who serves you coffee, assuming there's not a big queue, talk to your colleagues, be friendly to people. After all, what's the point of developing a posh accent if you don't actually talk to people? Okay. Go to parties. He says bring a gift with you when you go to a party and send a thank you. Take some flowers with you to somebody's house if you go. I like to host parties. I've hosted a number of parties in my flat before. Of course, I ask people to take their shoes off. That's just me. I don't want them messing up my lovely wood floors. I don't seem to get invited back to parties so often. I think people maybe don't entertain in their homes so much these days, which I think is a frightful shame. I think maybe because a lot of people have got children, they don't necessarily like inviting people over because it's hard to get your home tidy for people to come and visit. But I think the dinner party needs a revival. We need to have more dinner parties, more house parties. Show off your lovely house. Uh, Find a social hobby. So get involved in activities, join a book club, a painting class. Of course, traditionally the upper classes are associated with certain sports. So shooting, riding, playing polo, cricket and rugby. Rugby is particularly associated with private schools in England, called public schools here. You don't necessarily have to play those sports to be posh, but you do need to cultivate maybe something of the values of sportsmanship, that sense of fair play. That's very important to being posh. Sense of fair play. Learn as much as you can. Stay up to date on current events and read books whenever you have spare time. Yes, that's really important. So if you're posh, generally we associate being posh with having some degree of education, so you may not necessarily have done a PhD at university, but a posh person will be expected to have had an education and to know things, okay? The author suggests that you read the newspaper. Fantastic, that's really good advice. I will probably do a video about why it's really important to read newspapers, okay? When I was a kid, my parents used to have the newspapers delivered, and I always used to read them. When I was a student, I used to read the newspaper in the college library. You learn so much from reading newspapers, it really builds up your general knowledge. And she suggests read classics of literature, such as Jane Eyre. I think it's important also to read the ancient classics, the classics of Greece and Rome. You must have heard Boris Johnson, our former Prime Minister. He is generally known to people as being somebody who knows the classics. He can quote Homer in the original Greek at the drop of a hat. It would be a really good idea, and perhaps we'll make a video about this, to get familiar with the classics of Greece and Rome. As these works, Homer, Virgil, Greek tragedy, these are the foundations of Western culture and society. So I think it's good to have some familiarity with those ancient classics. Send thank you letters. So if somebody's given you a gift or you've been to a party, you should send a thank you letter. The author does acknowledge that these days we don't tend to write letters very much, so she suggests that maybe you might want to send an email instead. Personally, I tend to do that sort of thing using WhatsApp. WhatsApp's one of the main ways that I communicate with some of my friends and family. Looking posh. So she says practice good hygiene, have tidy appearance. I'm not really one to talk on this, seeing as I've got messy long hair. But I do clean my hair regularly, although it's very long and messy. And I spend lots of money on hair care products. Exercise regularly, stay healthy, good advice. I'm not sure that's something that I do terribly well. I'm a bit lazy, although I do lots of walking. I walk to work every day. Invest in your personal style. So, being posh tends to be associated with the classic style of dressing. So, wearing formal suits where you're expected to be formal, when you're expected to be casual, wearing things like blazers and proper shirts rather than t-shirts, dressing in very form-fitting clothing and clothing that's got a timeless, elegant look to it, using lots of natural fibres. What I particularly dislike is a kind of faux country gentleman look that's so common amongst hipsters. You know the barber jackets and the cloth caps. Young men who want to look like they're out hunting. I really dislike it. It just looks so false. And the young men who cultivate that style always have these dreadful long beards. I really don't like it. Of course, I'm not really one to talk on this subject because I dress like a slob, as I say. When I'm not working, I live in heavy metal t-shirts and tight jeans and flip-flops. I don't dress smartly or elegantly at all. Maybe I ought to, or maybe one day I will try to dress a bit better, but that's me. What posh people don't do is dress in a flashy, show-offy way. That's not elegant at all. That's new money, not old money. If you're posh, you know you've got nothing to prove. You don't have to show off your status because you're confident in it. So you don't wear lots of designer clothes and flashy jewellery. You kind of keep that sort of flashiness to a minimum. There is a faction within the kind of posh culture that doesn't bother about appearance at all. I don't know if you've ever seen the Netflix series, well, it was on Netflix anyway, Traitors, a spy program. And there's a character in that from an upper class background, and this character said, upper class people aren't flashy, they often walk around with holes in their trousers. So it is possible to be this kind of posh person who dresses in a really slobby, shabby way, lack of care about their appearance. But it's very difficult to pull off. You can't be that person while being a slob. The reason such a person dresses so shabbily is because they're so confident in their sense of superiority that they don't think they really need to think about their appearance very much. They just assume they're superior and everybody knows it, so why dress elegantly or stylishly or wear new clothes? You just walk around with trousers with holes in. But that's very difficult to pull off. You have to have a kind of ethereality to you, an aloofness to be that posh bag lady or that posh tramp. There are people who manage to do it, and you can be posh while looking like a complete slob, but I don't know if you can do it. It's very difficult to pull off. What else does she say? Okay, so that's basically her article about how to be posh. I think there's some really good things there, and we'll probably elaborate on some of those points in future videos. Okay. So I hope you found that helpful. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a like, and do visit that WikiHow page, How to Be Posh, because I think you'll find it very informative. maybe we'll talk about some other pages on WikiHow in future. Okay, thanks ever so much for listening. Do give this a like, please. Okay.